Greetings and welcome to another episode of Shakespeare Reviews here at Life's Affair. Today we are going to be reviewing a classic science fiction movie, Forbidden Planet, from 1956. It is about a starship that searches for survivors of a planetary expedition on the planet Altair 4. After finding two survivors, an old scientist and his daughter, a mysterious force attacks, and they must discover its source before the entire crew is destroyed. Now, the cast stars Walter Pidgeon, Anne Francis, and a very young Leslie Nielsen long before he participated in the comedies he's mostly known for today. And it was filmed on the same stage as The Wizard of Oz. Because when you're filming at MGM Studios, let's be honest, every stage you film on, something famous happened there. It's just the way of the beast. So, a wonderful science fiction classic, a very out-of-the-box movie for Shakespeare Reviews. And we're off. What do you say, Will?
The only thing that keeps going through my head is the line from Rocky Horror Picture Show. Anne Francis stars in Forbidden Planet, which for years was literally the only thing I knew about this. And then I also knew shortly after that that Robbie the Robot, who was also the original robot for Lost in Space, Danger Will Robinson, was the Ariel-ish, Caliban-ish robot in this. But this is so much fun. This is let's call it a spiritual remake of The Tempest, because broad strokes, you look at it and you say, yeah, it's The Tempest. Up close, oh no, this is different, and this is different. Much as how 10 Things I Hate About You is a spiritual remake, if not a direct remake, of Taming of the Shrew. So I quite enjoyed it, but I know this is one of your favorite movies, and this being our, in chronological order, I think 11th or 12th review that we've been recording. I know you've been dying to get here, so I'm just ready to sit here and like listen to you wax philosophic about it.
Which is a really polite way of saying geek out heavily.
Oh yeah, do it, totally geek out. Do it.
You don't see it very much from me, but in this case, I think you might see it a little bit.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I'm not sure how much nerd stuff you see over here, but you said Starship, and when you say Starship, I think two things. I think, A, we built this city on rock and roll,
yes.
But also, I think
1701.
1701D in this case.
Well, in that case, yes.
It's the pretty one. But no, I mean, and we can get into some forebearers to Star Trek and whatnot.
Oh, yes.
And how it connects later. But just take it away, Andrew. I'm excited for you.
All right. I'm going
to eat this biscotti as you do it.
I think it's very important to talk a little bit about the history of sci-fi here, because of the influence and ramifications that this movie had on television and film, etc., and we will get into that. It's kind of important to talk about the climate at the time with science fiction movies. Now, the major studios looked at science fiction before 1950 as mainly fluff, filler, packing peanuts, kids' movies to fill up time on a Saturday. Not something that would be financially beneficial to invest a lot of money in, or anything that would be Oscar worthy. So they didn't spend a lot of time on it. Until about 1950, when a few movies like Destination Moon came out and suddenly made some money, some serious money. This was the time of the 50s, where science was cool. The atomic age, where anything was possible, where we knew we were going to get to the moon, we just weren't sure how soon. Where we thought in just a matter of a few years, we would be having jetpacks and flying cars. So there was a lot of wonder going on with the general populace. And I think that kind of changed everything a bit. So when that became known, 51 was an interesting year where some of the major studios invested big money into science fiction films. such as RKO with The Thing from Another World, and 20th Century Fox with The Day the Earth Stood Still, and Paramount with When Worlds Collide. They invested anywhere from like $700,000 to $1 million, which at that time was a huge amount of money for a picture, much less a sci-fi picture. And they all made really good money on them that year. So that changed perceptions a lot. Paramount did another attempt in 1953 with War of the Worlds. And they didn't quite, they put $2 million into it as a budget, and it was a critical success, popular, but they didn't make near as much money. They still stuck to around that 2 million box office take. So it kind of petered out, and a lot of independent studios made those low budget, $100,000 budget sci-fi films to $400,000 budget sci-fi films. And they made money and satisfied the need, but the quality wasn't there. Then came 1956, where MGM, let's just call them the granddaddy of studios, because when it came to quality, whether it was directing, the quality of the equipment, the art department, the costumes, even the color saturation of the film they used, there were no equals. I mean, they were arguably the best in quality as a studio, even at that point. And it showed. So when they decided to take a shot at it, what did they do? They put a $2 million budget on a sci-fi film, and they put all of their A people on it. So much so, they even wanted to bring in an animator from Disney to do the special effects. Some of the special effects, like the creature that was in there and the laser effects and all that, were animated. Not anything else, not different types of film effects. They were animation done on top of the film. It had been popularized by MGM a decade before in movies like Anchors Aweigh, where you see Gene Kelly dancing with Jerry Mouse from Tom and Jerry fame. So this was a known process. But by the mid-50s, the art department, I mean, the animation department, at least, at MGM, had fallen a little. They really didn't do much in the way of animation. So it was a fraction of what it had been. So because they were still very, well, quality was important to them, they got animator Joshua Meader to come from Walt Disney and to supervise that. And he did a great job with it, I think you can tell. Now, the quality of the film, whether it's the painting in the background on Altair 4, where you see the sets behind it, I mean, the quality, the level of detail is so phenomenal compared to everything else at the time, sci-fi related. It's really not even worth comparing. The sets, I mean, you look at the spaceship with the sets inside, the quality, just the background stuff that you really can't even see clearly. It looks like there's tons of interesting stuff all over the place. And it looks like it might be real. Like that is exactly how a spaceship would be organized, and everything seems to make some sense. And that's how the set departments worked for MGM at the time. They didn't just throw some tubing and some piping and paint it brown or gray or silver. They put thought into everything and made it look as accurate as they possibly could come up with from a creative perspective. And it shows. Now, this movie did really well. It made they put a $2 million budget. It made $2.8 million or so, which for that type of movie was quite impressive. Now, I can go ahead and talk a little bit about the director and the screenplay writer. The director was Fred M. Wilcox, who was an assistant for a long time of King Vidor. Now, if you're not familiar with King Vidor, he was, a very known director for the 30s and 40s, and was known as an actor's director. He was very good at working with cast. And Fred M. Wilcox, I think, learned a lot from that, but he made a name for himself working with child actors. He was responsible for the first Lassie film, Lassie Come Home, working with Roddy McDowall, and the sequel to that. And he also worked on the Secret Garden in the 40s too, and did did very well with that. So by this point, he was kind of known as working well with children, but I think he also brought that actor's director approach to it, which I think translated well to this film, where the dialogue and the feel for everybody does work well. Now, the screenplay was written by Cyril Hume, who made a name for himself by writing the screenplay to the original Tarzan the Ape Man from 1932, making an adventure story work well on the big screen, making something that's a little far-fetched and making it believable. And that, I think, is what he brought to the table. Now, this film, I'm going to just say this. From the 1950s, it was the most influential sci-fi film by far. In my opinion, you put all the other sci-fi films from the 50s together, and this movie was more influential than all of the others combined. I know that's a crazy statement, but I believe I can back it up. This is the first film to depict humans traveling in a starship of their own creation faster than light. It was the first depiction of a robot as an actual character that had a personality in a film. That had never been done. Before, they were just machines, like a toaster where you just press a button or say, do this, and it did it. This was the first time that a distinct personality for a robot came around. It was the first movie with an electronic score, courtesy of Beebe and Louis Barron. They brought them in. They called it electronic tonalities in the credits. I thought that was a nice way to put it. But yes, all of these things were quite revolutionary. And to say that it influenced sci-fi and films, it influenced everything from The Twilight Zone and The Outer Limits heavily after this. It influenced Doctor Who. It influenced Star Trek. It influenced Lost in Space, of course, because the robot was created, Robbie the Robot was created by the man who went on to Lost in Space and created the robot for them. I mean, all of these sci-fi films, huge influence. The idea of having such a high level of quality on the sets and the background and making it seem like this is a real place as opposed to just some fanciful, artistic, abstract thing for the setting and the place. To say that had influence is, of course, huge. I mean, everything from going down to 2001: A Space Odyssey with their level of realism in space. I don't think there is a sci-fi film that came after it that was not hugely influenced by it. And how many films can say that? So this is a very important film, and I'm going to tell you, it is not just important for sci-fi, but I think important for films in general. Now, the fact that it also came from a Shakespeare concept from the writer is fascinating, because the director swears that he didn't even know it when he was filming it. That he just looked at a script and said, oh, that's a good story, and he made it work. And I think this is one of those situations where that actually helped the story a lot. He came at it making the story work as opposed to worrying about how faithful it was to the Shakespeare play. So I'm really looking forward to getting Will's take on this as to how much it reflected the play and, whether it was fair to the play at all. So Will, please, I'm dying to hear this part.
Well, this was just a wonderful thesis that we were getting into, and I really wished that for this I had a bucket of popcorn as well, because I would just be like, let's do this. And cut away to me just like, yes. This is a loose adaptation, as we might say. It's not even it's not anywhere close to a direct adaptation of just, it's the Tempest in space. No, absolutely not. So many differences. Characterizations are different. For instance, Robbie the Robot is both a bit Caliban and Ariel. He is both. In terms of, is this true to the Tempest? I would say yes. It is just as much of a spiritual successor to the Tempest as some of the other adaptations we've talked about. Whereas 10 Things I Hate About You is a wonderful spiritual successor to Taming of the Shrew. So this is a spiritual successor to Tempest. West Side Story is another wonderful thing, and I hope we do West Side Story at some point because it's Shakespeare, but it's a musical by Sondheim. That is, again, not a one-to-one, but there are the broad strokes that are all there. And I think this works really, really well in that. But also, you want to talk about, because I'm a Star Trek nerd, I'm sorry. You want to talk about the influences on Star Trek? The planet's name pops up throughout the Star Trek canon in nearly every one of the series up through Voyager. It had been mentioned at least once, even if it's just an on-camera mention, like in the background, it's on a panel or something. Oh yeah, Altair 4. It's in Sector 9. It's mentioned in the best Star Trek movie of all time, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. It's just an ode to how important this movie is. Starship, I'm not sure if it had actually been a term coined before this movie. I was doing a little bit of research whilst you were talking, and the earliest I can find for it is Forbidden Planet, of being mentioned as Starship. Now, as you had mentioned, it is the first depiction of humans traveling faster than light under their own cognition. Not cognition, under their own cognizance, their own device. But the time period for it, the 23rd century, is also very important. That was a direct influence. This movie was a direct influence onto Gene Roddenberry for when to place his wagon train to the stars. And Roddenberry himself was a big Shakespeare fan, as were many of the other writers who would work on the Star Trek series and movies, that there are so many Shakespearean themes and also direct quotes that come in and out of the various series. So the setting, the how-tos, all of it influenced everything, and was also, as you say, as we are establishing, going back to Shakespeare, it's a wonderful adaptation, loose and spiritually very connected. And as you say, with the director not knowing, you think maybe it helped? I don't think it hindered, but I feel like it didn't matter because the story itself was strong enough on its own power that it's like, okay, let's just take what's on the page and put it onto the stage and not worry about, oh, look, the doctor is actually Prospero. Oh, look, Altera is actually Miranda. I mean, none of that. It's just, let's just do it. And the audiences go, hey, I remember this. And basically allowing it to become a tale as old as time.
Yeah. I think what I meant by it helped is that it kept the director from trying to force something that maybe wouldn't have worked as well, to try to force that relation.
Indeed.
I mean, who knows? Maybe it wouldn't have, but I'm just saying it
and if he had
kept him from falling in that trap.
If he had tried to, it might have started coming across as it's a little too clever by half.
Yes.
Because when you really try to make the parallels obvious, sometimes it works, but more often it does not.
I think it just left the director to just tell a good story. And,
yes, indeed.
And the writing, I mean, what it was based on works for itself. So just go with that. And I think that helped. I mean, I'm going to make a confession. This is actually not my favorite sci-fi film from the 50s. After all of I just said, I mean, personally, I actually really love The Day the Earth Stood Still from 1951.
Oh, that's good. Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's such a phenomenal film, and I loved it. I don't think it was as influential as this. This is my second favorite film from the 50s, sci-fi anyway, but I still, I mean, it's not, and that's okay. It's still the quality of the animation and the richness of the color, I mean, exceeds any other sci-fi film from the decade. Okay. I mean, later on, you get like some movies like well, I mean, the same year this came out, they had from Allied Pictures, that was the Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which only had a $400,000 budget. And
Really?
yeah, and they made like $3 million on that. But it was, but I mean, it was a black and white film. I mean, it filmed all in California locally and done. I mean, it was yeah, they went very low budget and they didn't
Whereas
use
this, they had to go film on location on an Altair 4.
right. No, they did studio work, which can be pretty expensive with the sets and everything. But yeah, they just filmed it at local farmhouses and that kind of thing, and it was just that kind of worked. They also used not the biggest names in Invasion
Well,
of the Body
yes,
Snatchers.
let's talk about young Leslie Nielsen, young
Yes.
dramatic leading man,
Really?
Leslie Nielsen. Goodness gracious. Was this before or after his, oh goodness, what was it? The Swamp Fox?
Oh, right, the Swamp Fox from Disney.
Yeah.
Yes, oh gosh, it was around that time.
It's around the
So
same period.
It was around the same. I mean, he was known as a a dramatic lead and
Yeah.
action hero type thing.
He was the TV friendly
Yeah,
Paul Newman.
and yeah, exactly. And he was very relatable, and you liked him immediately just from his
Yes.
attitude and his looks. I mean, he was an affable guy, and that worked. It
And
worked
if you're
really
making
well.
the comparisons at home, guys, gals, and non-binary pals, Leslie Nielsen played the counterpart to Ferdinand in The Tempest. There you
Well
have
played,
it.
well played, well played.
Thank you.
So yeah.
I do.
I mean, so many good things, and the story with, of course, an alien civilization far advanced of us that still made a serious mistake. Being incredibly intelligent, but not infallible, and that concept is quite profound because no matter how smart you think you are, you're not infallible.
Well, it's also goes into the thing of no matter how good you are, there's always someone better.
There is that.
Or at least there always will be someone better. Like you might be the best in the moment, but
Mhm.
someone is waiting to unseat you.
Hmm.
So it's
Yeah, it's the
gather
common.
ye rosebuds while you may.
It's the classic thing of the Roman conquerors coming back into Rome with the slave holding a crown above their head and whispering in their ear, "All glory is fleeting."
Remember you are mortal. Remember you are mortal.
Exactly. It's yeah. This is enjoy it now.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, this movie is campy. By today's standards, it's campy.
It very much is, but by the standards of 1956,
cutting edge.
holy smoke! I mean, and it's campy now. It is hackneyed now.
Yes.
In the time, in the place for which it was made, as you say, it was cutting edge. It was inventing the tropes.
Yes.
It's
and nobody knows inventing the tropes like Shakespeare, so he knows what he's talking about.
But in terms of being campy, camp was very much one of the prevailing styles
Very true.
of the period. And this isn't high camp. I'm like, you want to see high camp, go watch the original Star Trek series episode, The Trouble with Tribbles. That is high camp. Or go watch Mud's Women. High camp. That is sci-fi having a lot of fun with itself. This is sci-fi, in this case, still taking itself a little bit seriously while not being precious about it.
Yeah.
It's saying, we are just telling you a story. This is just one of many stories. But in terms of the treatment of the robot, this is coincidental with the time period of Asimov writing his iRobot series and creating his laws of robotics, which Robbie does not completely follow. So, but this is your first major robot character. Other than Metropolis, Metropolis had one. What was that? 25-ish years before this.
Yes, 1927.
Yeah. Oh, 30 years. Okay. Yeah. So, robot stories were few and far between.
Yes.
But they very much treat Robbie the robot as what his name means. slave, which takes you into more of the Caliban side of things, because Caliban, directly by name, is called slave by Prospero in the original text. And robot is of Eastern European derivation, meaning slave.
True.
People were called robots before robots were called robots. Or we could go very 50s pronunciation appropriate, rabbit. Hello, rabbit.
Well,
Like saying
now,
rabbit.
I'm incredibly biased. I love this film, obviously. So if you couldn't tell, just as to set the record
I
straight.
could not. You
I know.
really hid
I
that.
hit it. I tried to
light
be
under a
objective.
bushel.
But so I really am curious. I mean, for you now as a watcher, I mean, did you watch this when you were a kid at all? Had you seen this when you were young?
No, I never saw this.
Okay, that's good. Okay.
I didn't see this until this was my second time out watching it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was an adult when I watched it.
Okay. So I'm really curious, considering the campiness of it. I mean, what did you think of it? I mean, was it still relatable? I mean, would you recommend this to the general audience to say, hey, no, this is a good watch, you'll enjoy it now?
It's a good watch. It's simultaneously a good watch while also being a bit of cinema history.
Okay.
Of saying, here's how you do it. Like Gone with the Wind. Gone with the Wind, I would say, is a good watch.
Yes.
Problematic in many ways, but it is, as is this, it is a good watch while also giving you cinema history.
Yes.
And this does the same thing. This is a good watch. This is decent science fiction, because what decent science fiction does is uses the science purely as a backdrop of how to advance the plot. Good science fiction tells you what it is to be human. Sometimes in the good ways and sometimes in the bad ways. And this did that. It holds the mirror up to humanity. And that, again, makes this a beautiful spiritual successor to The Tempest, because The Tempest, as the good Shakespearean plays do, holds the mirror up to humanity, says, here's what you are. And or here is what you can be, for good or bad. And this does that. This shows you that infallibility is not a thing. And we are creatures filled with avarice.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I liked this quite a lot.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. I always liked Rod Serling's definition of science fiction and fantasy. I thought that was always just such a good definition. And he said that science fiction is making the improbable possible, and fantasy is making the impossible probable. I always thought that was a nice, succinct way to put it, because it's very true. This movie is about a potential future, and it's maybe not probable, but let's just convert that and make it possible. And that, I think that's kind of what they accomplished. They said, in the future we'll be in a ship traveling in the distant future and traveling to different stars, and a few hundred years, who knows? If they're wrong, well, they'll be long gone, so nobody can sue them. So it's that's what that always bothers me with sci-fi writers who say, in 20 years this will happen, and I'm kind of like, wow, you're just you sure you don't want to Nostradamus that a little more and say in 500 years? I mean,
going back to the concepts of popular science, this is from a science optimistic America.
Yes.
As you said, jetpacks and flying cars, nuclear powered vehicles. When science was cool, and
most movies at the time would have put this in 1985.
Yeah.
They would have said, oh, in 1985, we're traveling to other stars.
Whereas in 1985, you used a DeLorean to go back to 1950.
Right? I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, it really was, their view of technology and what was going to be possible was so wildly, ridiculously optimistic. Where this just said, hey, let's look at it as hundreds of years in the future, because then we might make some real technological achievements. And I think that is a much smarter way to put it. Futurists are in movies are normally way, way, way off. It's always been frustrating to me. I don't understand it. I mean, why not put it several hundred years in the future? I mean, what harm does it do to approach it that way?
A good reason also to put a lot of science fiction in the relatively distant future is to make it seem long-term attainable. As in,
yes,
you say this is going to happen in 20 or 30 years, people are like, get out of town.
But people still go and watch those. It still surprises me.
Blade Runner 2044.
Yeah,
come on,
right? Yeah.
But to put it in the far future also allows you to take the step back, to have the remove and say, oh yeah, this is humanity.
Yeah.
And it's like, are we really going to do that? Are we going to be better? Are we going to be worse? Are we just basically the same stupid monkeys? I mean, what are we? But there's several things about this that I enjoy. Robbie the Robot.
Yes.
Was Robbie the Robot as himself.
Yes.
For the credits. But there is a long list of influences of this movie on the rest of popular culture, if I can go through a few of them.
Go for it.
All right. So, in the book The Tommyknockers by Stephen King, Altair 4, the same planet, references the home planet of the titular alien presence, the Tommyknockers. Goodness gracious. Elements of the Doctor Who series, Planet of Evil, were based on this film. Of course, Terry Pratchett, in his novel Strata, had his main character get stranded on a disc world which is driven completely by machinery in the underground. Close to the end, an explicit reference. Didn't you ever seen Forbidden Planet? Human movie. They remade it like 5-6 times. Things like that. Roddenberry frequently says that it is one of his inspirations for Star Trek, and it's also in his authorized biography where he says that. It's referenced in Babylon 5 on several occasions, one as an old movie, and then also they take elements of it. The Krell's Great Machine, elements of it are used for that. George R.R. Martin for, Game of Thrones. He cites Forbidden Planet as his favorite science fiction film, and he owns a working replica of Robbie the Robot.
Nice.
Because he's obviously a sane and entirely with it individual. I mean, and then they were going to make a remake of this in 2007 and 2008, going to be made by James Cameron, produced by Steven Spielberg, but then that fell apart. Yeah, J. Michael Straczynski of Babylon 5 was going to be involved with it. He was announced as writing the remake, and then Joel Silver was going to come on as a producer. But in March 2009, JMS reported that the project was abandoned and that a new script was requested, and we have seen nothing in the intervening nearly 12 years. Andrew, let's go back. Give this movie a final rating for this, our longest episode ever.
Wow.
Possibly.
Wow. I'm going to give this movie the full rating of a Creole adult.
Oh, that's like 7.5, 8 feet tall.
Yeah, it really is. I mean,
Yeah.
that's like, that's hooking yourself into the machine and it's just going, phew, and you're just kind of like, wow, okay, that's a big Twinkie. I mean, that's where you're going with this.
That is a big Twinkie.
Yes.
All right. I am not going to use that same metric. I'm going to use a slightly different metric. I am going to give it a full Robbie the Robot.
Oh, wow, a full Robbie. Okay.
A full Robbie.
Wow.
Robbie.
That just okay, that just sounds like a sexual position. I'm just going to say it right now.
I gave it the full Robbie.
Right? Obviously a British sexual position, but that works for you. So that works.
Yeah, there you go. It's like, did you give it like what are we talking about? Are we talking about Robbie Coltrane? Are we talking about Robbie the Robot, Margot Robbie? And like, what are we talking about? Oh no, the robot. The robot.
Is it a full Robbie or a half Robbie? I mean, I don't know.
Well, half Robbie would just be the one.
Oh my God. Okay.
And I'm in my head very innocent and pure at this moment, and this is entirely Andrew.
It is. It is. It is. I just the way you said that, it was just like a full Robbie. Okay, you're gonna give it a full Robbie. Wow. Okay.
But I also
It couldn't have been just me. Seriously, couldn't have been just me.
I mean, unless you're only listening to this review and not watching it, I'm doing the arm thing. So
That doesn't make it sound better, man.
I'm doing the Danger Will Robinson arm.
Okay, that's better. Yes.
All right, there we have it. Now, friends, thank you so very much for tuning into what might possibly be our longest review, or might be a standard length episode depending on how Andrew edits this. My responsibility with this show is now over. But if you've enjoyed this show half as much as we've enjoyed making it, half as much as we've enjoyed this conversation, then we've obviously enjoyed it twice as much as you did, and that's called math. In that case, please consider supporting the show. Go follow us on social media. We are Life's Affair on all the major platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. Go follow us everywhere. And also consider becoming a Patreon of the arts by supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/lifesaffair. And then also you can follow me, your friendly neighborhood Shakespeare, on Facebook. I'm Shakespeare Approves, Instagram, Shakespeare.approves, Twitter, Shakes Approves, YouTube, Shakespeare Approves, and on Patreon, patreon.com/Shakespeare Approves. I'm sorry, patreon.com/Shakespeare. I don't even know my own social media. And consider buying me a cup of coffee, because after this review, I really need another cup. Go to coffee.com/Shakespeare. Andrew, where can they find you?
You can find me at facebook.com/The Irish Bard and theirishbard.com, and my Patreon, patreon.com/Irish Bard. You can also hear some of my music at theirishbard.bandcamp.com.
Until next time, everybody, remember, Anne Francis stars in Forbidden Planet. At the late night, never gonna get a remake picture show. See you next week.
See ya.